Joining me today to discuss the findings of this year's report are its co-authors, Peter Bowen and Michelle Munro. Peter, Michelle, wonderful to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks, Glenn.
Good morning, Glenn.
Michelle, I'd love to just kick this off with you reminding our audience what you do, what Peter does, and how they can access both of you.
Okay, so tax and retirement research. It's a wide range, all things tax, but really a focus on tax smart solutions, retirement planning, retirement research, as well as estate planning. We go coast to coast in St. John's, Newfoundland, Vancouver, and everywhere in between, supporting advisors and their clients. How people can access us is through the Fidelity sales team.
Excellent. Peter, you were just in the Yukon.
Yes, I was.
You're all over the place. So let's start with you, Peter. What is the retirement report?
Glenn, we've been doing this for, as you mentioned, 19 years. It's just relatively recently off the press, this year's retirement report, where we survey 2,000 Canadians coast to coast, and we make sure we survey both pre-retirees and retirees to get a sense of what is retirement thinking in the country.
And just for clarity behind the scenes, the mechanics of all of this, how was it determined who it went to? And it was coast to coast, and when did this occur?
So we do use a professional survey company that we engage each year. And we were in field back in January, in fact. It takes a long time to collate the information and dive deep into all the data to come up with the actual report.
And why is this report different from the vast number of reports we seem to see in the news?
Well, it's certainly one of the longest running, if not the longest running survey of retirement in the country. And that means we've been able to track sentiment and retirement preparedness over the years, including through the global financial crisis, the pandemic, and recently, a period of high inflation. And it provides a tool for advisors, right, to give to their clients and spark conversations about retirement.
So these are available for distribution from the advice community.
Indeed. Yes.
Very good. Michelle, how are Canadians feeling about retirement these days?
All right. So big picture, we ask, what is your outlook on retirement? So we asked the survey respondents that, and it's declining. So fewer and fewer people are saying positive, having a positive outlook. So that's actually down from 80% in 2018, and we're at an all-time low of 69% people who said positive. So we wanted to understand this group a little bit better. So we looked at it between pre-retirees and retirees. Retirees are feeling more positive than the pre-retirees. They just had a more negative outlook. And then we wanted to slice and dice a little bit more and understand that, and looking at those who had a written financial plan and those who did not have a written financial plan. Retirees with a written financial plan, 90% of those were feeling positive about retirement. Those without retirees without a written plan, 73%. So the people who are really drawing down the average of the positive outlook is the pre-retirees without a written plan. And it was only, let's see, 54% of those who had a positive outlook. So quite low. So I think that really highlights to people, advisors, the importance of that written plan, which I know is often painstakingly to do, but it's really helping their clients have a positive outlook on retirement.
I'm curious, when you think back, both of you think back over 19 years, is there a correlation between volatility in the market and how comfortable people are feeling?
Yeah, there is some, absolutely. A headline news, it's not just the volatility in the market. It's what we found is the news media, what it's showing about volatility in the market coming down, the economy, inflation, that was also drivers we felt in bringing down that overall outlook.
Yeah, the bigger stories that tend to drive it down, the
Makes sense.
financial crisis. Markets went down dramatically, but they recovered fairly quickly in the financial crisis, but it still had a big impact on people's thinking about retirement, the pandemic, of course, and high inflation. Right. So these are, I'd say, bigger factors than market volatility, but it certainly plays into it.
It makes sense why we do it yearly, because there is such change in the marketplace. What are some of the major challenges that Canadians are facing, Michelle?
So some of the challenges are thinking about those headline news about inflation specifically. And one of the things that we looked at is actually retirees who are supporting their adult children, non-student adult children, helping support them financially specifically. And what we found is that 6 in 10 retirees were helping their non-student adult children financially. And there was a variety of different items, some of the big ticket ones that you would expect, weddings, down payments for homes, but also those day-to-day living expenses as well. And looking at that for pre-retirees, only 4 in 10 said that they expected to be helping their adult children in retirement. So you're sort of I'm looking at these trends and I'm thinking, well, economic times, what's going on? Interest rates are higher, inflation. Well, we're going in the right direction, but I don't know where that's going to land. But I would expect that we're going to see more and more retirees who are actually helping out their adult children. So that 6 in 10, I would expect to increase.
Probably city dependent as well. Did you notice that across the country? As far as the cost of living, so more children may have to live at home.
In higher cost regions,
Sure.
yeah, that would, so you're thinking Toronto, Vancouver, et cetera.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's certainly something that advisors should probably be factoring into retirement plans for their
Right.
clients. The clients might not think they'll be supporting, adult children in
Well, especially
retirement.
those
Reality.
pre-retirees, the 4 in 10, like there's a gap there of 2. And I would expect that gap to be increasing in time. And when you're a pre-retiree, you have more time to plan for this and save, set aside a little bit more. Once you're in retirement, that nest egg is usually pretty fixed.
Just a reminder to everybody, which I should have said at the beginning, is if you have any questions, please do enter them. We just had one come in and it has to do with the fact that some Canadians are moving in and out of retirement as they pick up work after they've retired. What challenges does that bring to advisors from a planning perspective? Peter, maybe I'll go to you for that.
Well, there's a tax implication. That being a tax person, that's sort of where I jump to immediately. And advisors need to be aware of this and on top of it, because it can shift the retirement cash flow equation, right? So you don't want to push people into too high a tax bracket. Sometimes we'll see people who have started old age security and they go back to work and suddenly they're getting hit by the OAS clawback. Right? So factoring that in, being aware of what the client's doing in advance, right? Especially if you're thinking about, oh, I'm going to pull more out of the RIF than the minimum if they've turned it on, and that may be the wrong thing. So people need to be aware of it and think about those marginal tax rates that they're being subject to throughout retirement.
That makes sense. Something else that they need to be thinking about is what's happened with the capital gains inclusion rate. You were both in the federal lockup for the report. Could you talk more about the capital gains inclusion rate changes? Peter, I'll go to you for that.
Right. So first, what is happening there, and it's a big change for some Canadians in that the inclusion rate is going from 1/2 to 2/3. But that said, for individuals, it only applies on gains above $250,000. So if someone has $350,000 of gains in a year, first 250 still at 50%. If the next 100 is at 2/3. So again, it doesn't affect most individuals, but think about people selling vacation properties or investment properties. That those types of gains can be very lumpy and can push people into that situation. More importantly, a lot of Canadians are, have corporations. It's hundreds of thousands of Canadians have corporations. Financial advisors are often dealing with those clients. They are often, valued clients. Corporations and trusts don't actually get the $250,000 threshold. So for them, the capital gains increase is effective from $1. It's soon going to be at 2/3, and just June 25 is actually the effective date.
Okay.
So it gives us a little bit of window of opportunity from a planning perspective.
You must be fielding a lot of questions, both of you, whether it be in Newfoundland or the Yukon. What are some aspects of this that advisors should consider when talking to their clients?
Well, the big question we're getting right now is, should I sell before June 25? Right, and that's a challenging question. I think in many cases the answer should be no, because, well, when would you otherwise sell the particular investment? And if it's 10 years out, do you really want to be paying taxes earlier, much earlier than you otherwise need to? And I think when you think about the present value, would I rather pay 25,000 on a $100,000 gain in a corporation now versus 33,000 in 10 years? I think I'd rather pay $33,000 in 10 years. But people are trying to sort this out from a retirement perspective. This really has changed the game for, again, some Canadians. I've got a very good friend. He and his wife were consultants and have a corporation. They're retired, and this is a big change to their situation. He's an accountant, so he's got this spreadsheet going out 30 years and with all the gains and dividends and different types of dividends. And a bomb just got thrown into that spreadsheet. It's a big adjustment to his cash flow. So he's trying to think, do we sell some investments before June 25? And some, yes, certainly not all. Also, for other Canadians, part of their retirement cash flow planning is to sell a cottage or an investment property. Well, again, that's going to trigger a lot of taxes, assuming the gain's more than $250,000. That has an impact on people's retirement planning. And finally, part of retirement planning is estate planning, right? Well, there's no exception on this for the year of death. So someone passes away with gains of over $250,000 on their taxable investments, and including cottages and investment properties, and doesn't have a surviving spouse. Again, it's a big jump in taxes. So we need to think about this. Advisors need to think about this long term and manage people's tax situations. That may mean, for elderly clients who aren't in great health, but sitting on big capital gains, maybe some of those should be triggered earlier than otherwise because of the implications to the estate component of this. So there's a lot of complexity here. We actually haven't seen the detailed legislation yet either, and it's going to be complicated. I think that's perhaps part of the reason why we haven't seen it yet. There may be other reasons, which we won't get into, but it's complicated. And in terms of planning, it's, sometimes we're getting questions that it's like, sorry, until we see the detailed legislation, it's really hard to answer that particular question. And so the whole tax community is waiting to see those rules. And there's some lobbying going on too.
So I think sometimes we can make educated guesses, but until we see the legislation, it's hard to give really concrete advice. And I think for advisors, where they can be adding value is bringing this to the attention of their clients. And this is how it might impact their particular situation. And it's a bit of a wait and see.
That makes a lot of sense. Michelle, we have a question that's come in. It has to do with the current inflation rates. How's that impacting retirees or pre-retirees' thoughts?
So inflation rates, okay, so people are concerned about it. And this really drives back to the conversation that we had about, well, people read the headline news and they are concerned about it. And inflation is one of the key risks of retirement because you have a set pool. You're looking at that retirement paycheck. And how does that impact your ability to purchase things in retirement and whatnot? CPP, old age security, are both indexed for inflation. But what we've seen in our report is that many people are actually delaying their retirement because they are concerned about inflation. Work a few more years, that can offset higher costs that we have, wait and see. It also gives them time to build up that retirement nest egg. Another area where we're seeing changes is how people are transitioning into retirement. Specifically more looking at, it's become less and less common where people do that hard stop of their primary career. And then they're going into semi-retirement or a more phased in approach.
Well, if I can interject, I'm always intrigued by the concept of semi-retirement. I think about it a lot as we've gone through these surveys over the years, and perhaps because I'm closer to retirement than you are. But it does strike me that we have an expert on the panel. Glenn, you retired in January, and it appears you're doing some work in retirement. So how's retirement going? How are you enjoying the work?
I enjoy this so far, especially sitting here with the two of you, talking to all of you. I hadn't planned on this, and I think what people have to expect is that if they are planning to retire, you don't know what you don't know.
You planned on retiring, but not working.
But not necessarily working.
Right.
And but I feel privileged that I have this opportunity, and it's because it allows me to keep connected with the firm, keep connected with clients, keep connected with just all the thoughts around what we talk about, if it's with portfolio managers, subject matter experts, I find it fascinating. And so it keeps me busy, but not too busy, because I also find this is interesting. A lot of people talk to me about, their thoughts about retirement, and they say their biggest fear is they don't know if they'll have anything to do. And I would say to them, there's a lot out there. There's a lot that you'll discover once you retire, and find things that you can give back in the community, things that are exciting for you, for your family, and for others. And I think, and for me, this is one of them. So,
well, that's a growing trend, and
it's a
our
growing
survey
trend
covers
of
this.
pre-retirees who are saying that they intend to do more of a phased-in approach to retirement. And as you were saying, the primary reasons are to stay busy, stay engaged, stay active.
Yeah.
There is a secondary reasons as well, financial, because it adds a little bit to your paycheck. You don't have to eat into your savings, your retirement savings, which is nice. Also, we found that people do it too for their lifestyle, an extra dinner out, for travel, what have you. And I think what advisors want to avoid for their clients is where they're not in a situation where they have to work. They want it to be a choice.
And there's a lot of research about this, right?
Yeah.
That where there are benefits to working in retirement, but those benefits disappear if it's not a choice. So
Yes.
was a phrase we like to do: a plan to work in retirement is not a retirement plan.
it sounded to me, when I read your report, if I get the numbers right, only 4% of people feel that they'll be able to work for enjoyment versus necessity. It sounded like the majority are feeling like, I'm going to have to do this because I'm going to have to supplement any type of retirement income from my investments or from other means. And I wonder if it'll really be their reality when they do retire.
We read the surveys and we get the results, and then you try to make educated reasoning behind it. And it is. And inflation is another factor as well, is that we are in a higher inflationary rate, and people are choosing to work for those reasons as well.
Michelle, are there other ways that people are having to adjust as they come into retirement based on the factors that are in front of them?
So there's a delay in retirement. We're seeing an increase in that, as well as we're looking at those who pre-retirees of when do you expect to retire? What age do you expect to retire? And for the pre-retirees, that is an increase, though there's a higher percentage saying 65 and later. And particularly, there's a higher percentage of those saying that I'm never going to retire. I'm just going to keep on working as long as I can, which I thought was really interesting. And where we saw the biggest jump was in female pre-retirees. So I thought that was a really interesting. So I thought it's also a good way for advisors to connect with their female clients who they often have it's a stereotypical statement, but they often have a less strong relationship with their female clients than their male clients. So this is a way to connect. And how are you feeling about retirement? Or what are some of your concerns? We have some research here. Does this relate to how you're feeling? So it's an opportunity.
So let's stay on the topic of advisors. Let's talk about the value of advice and how important it is for people at all stages, but in particular, pre and post-retirement.
Well, what we found is that there's a high correlation of those who have a written financial plan and working with a financial advisor to create that plan. 85% of those who have that written financial plan work with an advisor to create it. And then those who have a written financial plan feel, we talked about this earlier, more positive about retirement. But it's not just positive about retirement in general. They're feeling more optimistic about their investments, the future growth that they have. They feel that they're closer to actually achieving their retirement goals and overall just better prepared. So we also looked at, well, okay, better prepared for retirement. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, we asked them, well, is it financially prepared? Written plan? Absolutely, feeling better prepared. Emotionally prepared? If they have a written plan, also feel better emotionally. Socially, and even physically. And you think of those are 4 pillars of overall well-being. And those who have that written plan feel better. And I think so many advisors became a financial advisor because they wanted to help people. And they're probably looking at it through a financial lens, but it is overall well-being, helping people.
It's always amazed me that, even on the physical element,
Yeah,
having a plan matters.
mhm,
That's consistent across the years.
consistent,
Yeah.
yes.
And a question just came in about the capital gains announcement, but we touched on that. But then also, what are some of the major differences in retirement perspectives between retirees and pre-retirees? Maybe Peter,
Differences
touch on
in,
differences in retirement perspectives between retirees and pre-retirees. I read that as, what do people think they're going to be faced with, and what's the reality then?
yeah, and there's always differences between pre-retirees, how they're thinking about retirement, and retirees. I think a big factor is the uncertainty
Mhm.
for pre-retirees, right? Because their numbers in terms of their levels of preparedness are consistently lower. But I think some of that's the uncertainty. You have more certainty now that you're in retirement about how things are looking, what you're doing. It's early days for you, and you're very young, but
And it's been great so far, Peter.
but so we do see that natural once people move into retirement, as you've said, okay, this isn't as scary as I thought. Perhaps I'm busy, I'm engaged, I'm having fun. I think you said you are having fun. So, but that's until you get to that stage, it can be a bit scary for people.
It's a huge change to what you've been doing for a majority of your life.
Well, your working
really.
career,
Yeah.
which is decades long, 8+ hours a day, is working. And now in retirement, how does one fill that? And we saw in our survey where a significant portion of pre-retirees are delaying retirement because not sure what they're going to do in retirement.
The factor.
Yeah, some other reasons that they're delaying retirement is because of inflation, concerns that they haven't saved enough. So those are the biggest ones.
It'd be interesting to see how many people delay retirement, and then when they retire, say, I really shouldn't have done that. I should have waited, or sorry, I shouldn't have waited, and I should have done it when I was perhaps more physically able to do a lot of things, et cetera, because of the fears that they had. But again, working with an advisor can help reduce some of those fears.
Right. And I think as well, particularly so many people have their identity is linked to their employment. I am Michelle Munro, tax and retirement research.
Yeah.
And if you take that away, well, who am I? And financial advisors, are talking finances, but it's also the emotional aspect of it.
Emotional, social, physical.
Yeah.
That's why we like to bring that into the
Yeah.
conversation, because it's an important
Right.
element of retirement planning.
Yes.
We can also underline the fact that when you have a plan through an advisor, you should meet obviously regularly on it, because as you said, capital gains inclusion rate changes and throws a lot of that out the window. So we have to be reviewing this on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question about the capital gains inclusion rate? And that is, it's just us talking. Did both of you foresee this? Did you have a sense, were you surprised when it happened?
So firstly, there's been speculation for years that there would be an increase in the capital gains inclusion rate. The Liberals are supported by the NDP, and they were explicit in the last election campaign that they wanted to see a 75% inclusion rate. So the fact we've gone to 2/3. So I'm not overly surprised. We didn't have any early indication, but that speculation has been bubbling for years. The fact they've given this 250,000 threshold is a bit surprising to me. Although again, for hundreds of thousands of Canadians that have private corporations, they don't get that. And when the government talks about, I think the number's 0.13% of Canadians will be affected. No, that's not true. There are a lot of Canadians who have private corporations aren't included in that 0.13%. And it's a dramatic change to their retirement. So it somewhat surprised us, I think, but then again, finally, with the discussions, the speculation for a number of years, it's not a complete surprise.
I hope this is a fair question, but could you, and we won't make any bets, can you suggest what advisors, all of us, may want to keep on our radar of further changes as in the years ahead? Is there anything that you want to put out there as things just to keep your eye on that may or may not happen?
Well, I think that there could be future changes in the capital. Like the capital gains inclusion rate has bounced around over the years. I mean, we might have a change of government in a couple of years, perhaps, and that could result in perhaps a change back. I wouldn't necessarily count on it, but there are lots of other things. When do RIF minimums have to start? As a society in Canada, Canada's aging, right? But also people are living longer, they're working longer. So maybe RIF minimums should be reduced. should be spread out over longer periods, should actually start later. So there are a number of tax items where there's been some lobbying on that make a lot of sense to me to delay things. I also think the old age security numbers, when we look at the costs of OAS projected for the next decade plus, it's really going up. So will they tweak the clawback, for instance? That's a tricky one, because one of the things that retirees have in common is they vote. So, you know, governments mess with those with retirees' tax situations at their peril.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes we look south to the border as well.
Sure.
Capital gains on principal residence, only the first $250,000 is exempt, whereas in Canada, it's the entire gain. So that's something I sort of keep on the radar. You never know.
Don't be giving them any
No,
ideas.
no,
Put
no.
everybody awake now, Michelle. Thank you for that. But you're
Right.
and why it's so important that the two of you are doing what you're doing as well is to keep abreast of all of this. We can keep talking about it with our advisor clients, which is wonderful. Peter, how can advisors further support their clients with the research that's in this report?
Well, I think absolutely advisors should be having active conversations with their clients about retirement. Are things changing from their client's perspective? Put the plans down on paper. Michelle talked about the value of advice, but also the value of the financial plan, and update them regularly, right? Like whenever we have changes,
Sure.
right? The capital gains inclusion rate, but what changes are happening at the individual level for those clients. And finally, I'd say use our report, give it to your clients, spark those conversations, and make those conversations about retirement deeper, so that you're adding more value to the equation.
Excellent. And Michelle, how does our audience access this report?
Well, I believe that it's going to be a link as part of this Zoom
Wonderful.
cast, as well as on fidelity.ca. And if they still having troubles, they can go and talk to their Fidelity wholesaler, and they will send it to them.
Excellent. Michelle, Peter, thank you so much for being here. We covered a lot of ground and it was a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Thank you.